Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, coming to you from the Rockford IceHawks studio here in Chicago, Illinois, this is Bill Swerski's Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple 2 or 3 best podcasts around. So grab yourself an ice cold one and a bowl of sausage, sit down, park your keister, and listen to This is Bill Swerski's Sports Talk Chicago.
I'm starting 9 dictas.
I'm starting 9 dictas.
All right. Sounds like we need to make a side bet.
Starts with a C, ends with an O, and in the middle is a K.
Ditka's hair follicles cure malaria.
All right, gentlemen, the answer was the Bears.
Coach Ditka's hair could single-handedly cure our dependence on foreign oil.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears. He's a merciful Ditka.
The Bears.
The Bears. The Bulls.
Go, Cubs, go! Go, Cubs, go!
The Bulls. The Bulls. All right.
Hey, please, this is a family show, my friend. No cursing.
Yeah, that kind of language it belongs in the gutter, the speakeasy, and Coach Ditka's press conference.
You know,
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host Sean, and we've got a big episode today. We're going to be talking with Chris Block from thirdmanin.com, contributor to the Committed Indian, and our friend Gary about the Blackhawks and Bulls respectively. And we're not going to touch very much, we're not going to talk at all about the Bears, the Cubs, or the Sox this week because it's already a really long show. We're gonna really hit hard on them next week because training camp will be just around the corner and baseball season will be in full swing. So apologize if you are a fan of those and not the Bulls and the Blackhawks. You may not want to listen to this episode. Rather, you did listen and maybe you become fans. But we're not going to touch on those teams this week because it's already going to be a long show. But one thing I want to start with is that this week kind of added another reason why I bothered to do this show is I listen to a lot of sports radio, whether it be podcasts, small podcasts, or the major national shows or the local Chicago shows. And the national shows are what they are, is they try to have well-rounded, so everybody's happy because somebody's covered, every town is covered here and here, there a little bit. But the local shows, the Chicago shows, should be the ones that really hit hard on the Chicago sports teams. And I just want to put this in their perspective. Is this with the World Cup, and I get it comes around every 4 years, but is these local shows have been talking so much about soccer, and they talk about more about soccer than they do Blackhawks hockey. And Blackhawks have a championship caliber team. They just won it last year, and they had it come down to an overtime goal, they would have been the ones playing and probably winning the Stanley Cup. But they've talked so much about soccer these last couple of weeks, and I get that the World Cup happens every 4 years, but that is not a big sport in this country. They had a huge viewing party downtown for the World Cup game that the U.S. played in that sent them to the round of 16 or whatever it is, and 20,000 people came to watch it. When the Blackhawks had their parade when they won it, they had over 2 million people. So, this should really tell you is what your audience wants. And granted, it's these people's individual shows and they can talk about what they want. But the thing is we're listening because we want to hear about Chicago sports. We don't want to hear about some guy from Uruguay biting people. We don't want to hear about, we want to hear about our Chicago teams. That's what we're listening for. That's the reason I'm really doing this show. So I'm going to step off my soapbox now, and I guess we'll be talking to Chris Block first. Chris is always great when he's on the show, and happy to have him. Welcome, Chris, to Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. We're talking to you after the NHL draft. What are your thoughts?
Well, thanks for having me again. It went about as as much as I expected it to. The Blackhawks, they don't have any immediate needs, and so it's kind of nonsensical to think that they're going to, move up high in the draft to pick a kid that's ready now or ready in a year or two. They're looking more at longer range prospects, guys that they think have. They're a ways away from what the Blackhawks perceive to be these prospect ceilings, and that's a pretty common theme in what they did at the draft over the weekend. Is that they pick guys that have tremendous potential. There's knocks on pretty much every one of these players. As far as they don't play a complete game, they're not interested in playing defensively. Long periods of taking nights off and stuff like that. But still, they're 17, 18-year-old players. Blackhawks think that they can, round those players' games out with the help of, college junior ranks and some European leagues. So, again, it was about what I expected. Pretty uneventful. The kid that they drafted in the first round, though, and they moved up to get him because Nick Schmaltz, who's a kid out of Green Bay, he's going to North Dakota, which is the same program that Jonathan Taves went to. A dynamic forward, one of the more talented offensive players in the draft, but again, one of those players that seems disinterested when he doesn't have the puck is kind of the theme with Nick Schmaltz. He shouldn't be able to get away with that in North Dakota. So the Blackhawks are kind of leaning on that, and if that works out the way that they hope it will, then they got a fantastic player at the 20th pick. And if not, it's another wasted draft pick. But they're kind of in that comfort zone, they feel, which that they can take these risks, these high, not necessarily high risk, but risk high reward. Would be more like it, draft picks, and they did that up and down.
And it seems like they followed through with a lot of their tendencies in this draft. They picked a lot of American players. They seem to be very comfortable with American players. They picked their first pick was a kid going into the North Dakota program, which they really liked that North Dakota program. So it was, and then as you said, they picked some kids that aren't going to be ready next year or even the year after. Or in Schmaltz's case, he's probably 3 years out, and that seemed to be their MO, and they followed through with that this draft.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting that 2 years in a row now they picked, kids in the first round that are big Blackhawks fans, and I keep going back to this Kevin Hayes situation, because they're pretty uptight about what's going on currently with Kevin Hayes, and Kevin Hayes, a first round draft pick in 2010, who was basically the centerpiece of the Blackhawks shedding salary in the wake of the 2010 Cup, and now the kid's walking away from him, and I think that they're a little uptight about it, and I don't think it's not everything, of course, because the kids are talented. Schmaltz more so than Ryan Hartman. Ryan Hartman's more of a gritty, grind it out type forward, whereas Nick Schmaltz is again, that's skill, speed, stick handling. But I don't think it's a coincidence that 2 years in a row they pick guys that proclaim themselves to be pretty big Blackhawk fans.
Going back to the Hayes situation, it's funny because you really get a sense that he's trying to walk away from the Blackhawks, but both sides are trying to play it cool. The Bowman and the Blackhawks are saying, "Oh, we're in negotiations." I believe yesterday I read that they were back at the negotiations, and Hayes' camp is saying the right things, where they're saying, "Oh, we're just not in a rush because he just finished the program in April." And do you get a sense that this is not going to be a happy ending for the Blackhawks?
Oh, this, though, what you just talked about, it's a big charade. There's nothing to negotiate. It's an entry-level contract. There are little things here and there that can be negotiated, but those aren't the reasons why Kevin Hayes isn't going to sign. Kevin Hayes has already made up his mind. And, it's interesting because Stan Bowman, in making his case for Kevin Hayes to sign, is repeatedly kind of try to point out that some of these players that, the issue at hand here is that Kevin Hayes, obviously his brother Jimmy Hayes, who was traded to Florida at the beginning of this past season, Jimmy Hayes, Brandon Peary, Jeremy Morin, Kevin Hayes, these guys are all pretty close. And they all, I kind of share the same brain when it comes to this. And those players, Morin, Peary, Jimmy Hayes, all felt that they were jerked around by the Blackhawks. And when they were ready to come up and play, they were held down. And there's a good amount of truth to that. But the Blackhawks are a different organization, in which they're very successful. And, a lot of this, Sean, I think is, to a degree, is the Blackhawks and Stan Bowman in particularly really overthinking things in certain respects as far as the salary cap goes. And some people would disagree with me, but, when a player is ready to play, when a player has done everything that he can do at the minor league level, in my opinion, you have to bring him up. And I don't know that was the case with Jeremy Morin, because Jeremy Morin had a kind of an up and down minor league career through injuries and stuff like that. But that definitely was the case with Brandon Peary. Brandon Peary was ready, after an MVP season in 2012-13 in Rockford. And that was a season in which, had a lot of NHL players in that league. And he ended up, of course, the NHL players bolted halfway through, but still, Brandon Peary fared very well against top competition and ended up leading the AHL in scoring. That was his time to move on. And the Blackhawks held him down another year in part because of salary cap reasons. And they would deny that, but that was a part of their reasoning. And, it's just, Kevin Hayes looks at this thing and he sees what his buddies kind of went through with Chicago, and he says, screw it, I'm not going there. I'm going to go somewhere where there's an easier road. And, a lot of these guys look at it too. And I can't blame them, is they look at it and say, well, how long before I start making NHL money? And, players that were drafted in the first round, when they sign their pro contract, they get a nice signing bonus, and that gets them off to a good start. But they don't make big money until they're in the NHL. So if Kevin Hayes comes to Chicago and he spends a year or two in Rockford, he doesn't look too favorably on that. Whereas if he can go to another organization and maybe spend a little bit of time in their minor league, or step right onto an NHL roster, at least have a fair shot at competing for one. Because that's another thing that these Blackhawks prospects all kind of look at each other and nod silently, is that there really is no competition. There hasn't been any for a few years as far as players making the team out of camp. It's all kind of been preordained, and again, guys get held down. So what Stan Bowman is trying to convince Kevin Hayes of, as part of this quote unquote negotiation, is that he says to Kevin Hayes, he says, and he's done this in the media too, he says, look, you spent 4 years at college. You're you're not a kid coming out of juniors, 19, 20 years old, that needs seasoning, that doesn't have a man's body, that needs to learn how to compete against men and all that kind of stuff. He's saying to Kevin Hayes, pleading his case really, to save face, because they're going to lose him and they know it, is that you're 23 years old, you got a man's body, you're on the cusp. You don't have to spend 2-3 years in Rockford. And Kevin Hayes' side says, well, explain Ben Smith to me then. Because Ben Smith said, and this is what they've done, Ben Smith spent 4 years at Boston College, the same program that Kevin Hayes did, and Ben Smith had to spend 3 years in Rockford before he finally got an opportunity. And that's where the Hayes camp has Stan Bowman. And I don't see it changing. And, and another thing here is, the Blackhawks, they definitely investigated trading Patrick Sharp. And, I think the funniest thing about this whole past week is, with Patrick Sharp's agent, Rick Curran, coming out and vehemently, very angrily denying the fact that Patrick Sharp
the
was
more angry he was about the way he was absolutely not, the more it convinced me that he absolutely was on the trading block. I mean, Sharp, the way he finished off, I mean, he had a great regular season last year, but he wasn't that great in the playoffs, and he counts as he's like almost a $6 million cap hit.
Yeah, that's a part of it, and and Sharp was also playing with an injury in the playoffs, and and there's been some stuff that's going on behind the scenes that it's fixable, but maybe it's a precursor to the Blackhawks and Patrick Sharp parting ways. But
I've heard rumors floating around that he may or may not have gotten in a physical altercation with a teammate. Have you heard anything more about that?
Oh, it happened. Yeah, I mean it happened, but I mean those things do happen, and they don't get out. I mean it's just. In this case, unfortunately for the Blackhawks, it happened in front of a lot of people. So, sometimes these things just happen in a locker room and we never hear about it. I mean, so it's that's sort of it's that part of it. I don't think really has anything to do with anything. It's things happen, and teammates don't always get along. Teammates get angry at each other. When teammates go out drinking, sometimes they get into arguments. They're real people, but it really seems to be that there's kind of there's something going on here. And, it's funny because Stan Bowman has been very willing to talk about the Taves and Kane negotiations and very willing to come out and say, oh, yeah, they'll be done. They'll be done. Don't worry about it. They'll be done. And logic would say that that's like the worst thing to do because Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves have one more year until they're completely unrestricted free agents, free to go do whatever they want to do. So now they have the general manager of the Blackhawks on public record saying that this thing is going to be wrapped up, done, signed, sealed, and delivered within a week or two. But so Stan Bowman's perfectly willing to put himself out on a vine that way. But when the media comes to him about this Patrick Sharp stuff, he goes, well, I just don't think it's constructive to discuss those things. It's like, okay, I mean, how many more matzo balls need to be dropped here before everybody says, well, okay, we see what's going on. And I mean, I don't know that it's a given that he's going to be traded. And the one other thing that happened this weekend that I think really affected the Kessler negotiations from the Blackhawks end was that salary cap coming in about $1 million or $2 million less than teams were kind of hoping for.
Yeah, because if they would have brought Kessler in, that they would have been the only other team other than the Flyers that would have been over the cap at that point. And who are you going to move? I mean, you get rid of Bolig to get you under the cap. You really got to move some pieces in order to get Kessler under the cap space.
Yeah, well, even with moving Bolig, the Blackhawks still are over the cap. They're just over it, but they are over it with, figuring Teuvo Teravainen on the team and Rundblad as an extra defenseman because Rundblad isn't waiver eligible. So if the Blackhawks put Rundblad on waivers and somebody picks him up, they lose him, for the purpose of sending him to the minors. But with 22 guys under contract, the Blackhawks are over the cap still. It's by about $200,000, and that's with Morin on the team. That's with Teuvo on the team. But because I think everything that people are looking at Cap Geek has Joakim Nordstrom on the NHL roster, and I don't think that that's necessarily a given. But yeah, I don't think it is. It was funny to me that $68 million. It ended up the salary cap upper limit ended up at 69, but it was that 68 number started to float around on Friday in the hours leading into the draft. And as soon as that 68 number came in, we got word 10 minutes later that the Blackhawks had pulled out of the Kessler talks. And the thing about the Kessler thing was, the Blackhawks were very much interested in trying to get him, but the Blackhawks didn't have the pick that Vancouver wanted. and they weren't really the Blackhawks weren't willing to not draft at all in the first round because they ended up with a better pick than Vancouver ended up getting. But the problem was that for whatever reason, Vancouver didn't want Sharp. So in order to make the Kessler deal happen, the Blackhawks had to pull off two major deals. They needed to trade Sharp or something else to get rid of a significant amount of salary to make the Kessler addition work. Plus, they'd also have to pull off the Kessler deal. That's a lot of things to do, in a week's time when all this really started to go down.
And wasn't Vancouver asking included in the trade either Saad or Teuvo?
Well, I'll tell you this. The reason why they were asking for those players was because the Blackhawks didn't have the pick that they wanted. What Vancouver wanted was younger players that could step in now. So, and a number one draft pick that they could use this past weekend. Because Vancouver kept saying, oh, well, there's no timetable on this. That was crap too, because after the trade was made, they said, well, we needed to get it done today so we could use the pick in this draft. It's like, okay, everybody's lying to us, Sean, but what Vancouver wanted was what the Hawks were offering, which was Leddy. But they also wanted a forward that would be able to step in and eat some of the minutes that they were losing in Kessler. That's where Nick Bonino, who's an underrated guy that Anaheim gave up in the Kessler deal, plus Lucas Spezza, who's a defenseman. He's kind of in that Leddy vein where, although I think Leddy's a better defenseman than Lucas Spezza, in that Leddy vein where it's kind of like for a few years or a couple of years here, people have been waiting for Lucas Spezza to kind of take that next step up and into being a solid NHL reliable defenseman. And Leddy, for a number of reasons, hasn't happened in Chicago either. But on Chicago's end, it was Leddy, and then Vancouver's like, well, you don't have the draft pick that we want, so we want Teravainen. I don't think that Saad was ever really seriously talked about, just because if you're trading Saad, then that's almost a Saad for Kessler kind of a transaction, because you're getting a young player who, if you ask a lot of people, is on the cusp of stardom for Ryan Kessler, a 29-year-old guy, second-line center with some miles on him. I mean, that seems like a pretty fair trade to me, Saad for Kessler. So I just don't buy that Saad thing is like, oh, well, they want Saad and other stuff too. I mean, that's bogus. What they wanted was what the Hawks were offering, which was Leddy, Teravainen, and then maybe another prospect or something. And the Hawks just weren't going to part with Teravainen, and that's where Anaheim remained, as they were from the very beginning. Anaheim remained the front runner.
So, I guess this sort of steps into the question, who's going to be the second line center for the next season?
Well, I don't think we've heard the last of, Sharp's name being, bandied about. It's if Spezza's still in motion, and I don't know the details. A lot of people have made a big deal about how Patrick Sharp has a no movement or a no trade clause. What we know is it's a modified or a limited no trade. So this isn't necessarily a situation where the Blackhawks have to get Patrick Sharp's approval. And we don't even really know what the circumstances, and I haven't seen anybody that's been able to get a definitive word on it, because all we know is that when Sharp signed his deal, Stan Bowman did answer the question at a press conference, said that, yeah, his no movement, his no trade is similar to what Brent Seabrook's was. My feeling, and this is just a guess, is that I think that the nitty-gritty of Patrick Sharp's no trade, no movement is kicking in on July 1st. And that's what the rush to get what Patrick Sharp's trade value is and investigate trades for Sharp is. I think that that's what this is, because Seabrook's no trade kicked in when he got his last signing bonus. And for Seabrook, the first 2 years of his contract, he got paid a lump sum of his yearly salary on July 1st. this will be year 3 of Sharp's deal, and this is the last year that he gets a signing bonus. So my guess, and again, this is just a guess, is that the nitty-gritty of Sharp's no move, no trade kicks in on July 1st. Again, it's just a guess. I don't know that. But that would seem to make sense as to why all of a sudden there's this rush to find out what Patrick Sharp's value is.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely moves on the horizon, I feel, because how tight they are to the cap. And I have a feeling that Stan Bowman is going to want to be, my personal opinion, I don't have anything to back this up, but I feel he's really going to want to push to get a decent amount under the cap so that at the trade deadline, he could add a player if need be, where I felt like this year he was limited in what he could do.
I'm surprised that didn't happen at the draft, to be totally honest with you. I mean, if you look and see what they got for Brandon Bollig, the fact that they got, and I'm not, I know exactly what Brandon Bollig is. He's a 12 forward. He's a character guy, a role player on a team. But the fact that they got a draft pick above 100 for Brandon Bollig, I'm very surprised that Johnny Oduya didn't go on draft day. What that says to me, again, Sean, is that Oduya is not necessarily the guy that they're so ready to move out. And I don't know what that means. I guess my first inclination would be that they're still actively pursuing a second line center, that it wasn't Kessler and Kessler alone. I don't see where Joe Thornton fits, but that maybe Sharp's, maybe Sharp does have them by the sack, and he says, well, I'll go to San Jose. And maybe that's how this happens. But I don't see where him going to Sharp, going to Ottawa makes sense for Ottawa. So, again, with Spezza, you're kind of looking at another couple deals to make that work. And maybe in any situation, the Blackhawks still need to make 2 deals because, again, I mean, they're at 22 players and they're over the cap. Now, that you could easily rectify that situation by trading Johnny Oduya, but trading Johnny Oduya means that you're going to have a young player on the roster, a young defenseman, and do you play that young defenseman with Nick Leddy? I don't know that necessarily works for them. But again, it's interesting to me that somebody else besides Bollig didn't go because their cap issues, as I've said, haven't gone away. There's still more moves to come. And the fact that they didn't make a little move just to get themselves under the cap tells me that we may have a significant transaction still to come.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, they've got some young defensemen coming up, and Oduya is a piece that he's almost $3 million, so that's a significant hit right there, and he didn't have the greatest of years last year, so it's Well, the way that I've, for weeks now, the way that I kind of saw this thing shaking out was the Blackhawks going to Michael Rozabal and saying, listen, you're our 7th defenseman if you stay, or we'll find you, we've talked to this team and this team and this team, and they all are interested in you being their 5th or 6th defenseman. So you could go there, play every night, or you could stay here and play 30, 40 games, if that. I think Michael Rozabal would take going somewhere where he could play every night. That's just my assumption. So you move Rozabal out, and you put whether it's Dahlbeck or Steven Johns. Adam Clendening's not ready. They're not planning on bringing him up. I don't know why people keep mentioning his name, but you got Dahlbeck and Steven Johns that are kind of right on the cusp. They could go either way, whether it's moving right up or spending a little bit more time in Rockford. But you move Rozabal out, and then it's just a question of, I truly believe that they're looking
they're looking very strongly at having both Dahlbeck and Johns on the team. So in order for that to happen, another defenseman has to move too, and they've got to figure out what they're doing with Rundblad, because Rundblad was not impressive, and I mean he could stay as the seventh defenseman, but Joel really didn't seem to care for him too much, and maybe you trade him now for whatever you can get for him just to get him off your cap, and Stan Bowman just kind of has egg on his face on this one, because from the very beginning I never understood what he was doing, and he didn't draft. He lost his second round draft pick because of it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you, Chris. So I'm not going to be surprised if Oduya eventually moves and Letty moves. I don't know if it's.
I think it'll be one or the other, but I definitely think one of them is gone.
And Roosevelt is going to get that offer, and I just don't know. I mean, I guess there's going to be somebody out there to take him because he doesn't make that much money, and he's not a terrible player. He's just an older player that's not going to be. He's not going to be in your top 6 for a championship level team anymore.
Yeah, for a team that's that isn't very financially well off, but needs to get to the salary cap. In a week or two, when free agency dies down, you could see a trade for Michael Roosevelt to, name a smaller market team, because Roosevelt's cap hit, he's got 1 year left on his contract. His cap hit's 2.2, but he's only making 1.75 in real dollars this year. So that's something that a lot of teams would be interested in, a serviceable veteran defenseman to help out younger guys, not making a lot of money and making even less in real cash. That's desirable. And again, that's another reason why I think he's moving.
And with Morin and Ben Smith and Antti Ranta all getting 2-year extensions this past week, does that mean the writing on the wall of Sheldon Brookbank is gone?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think really at this point it's up to Sheldon Brookbank. Does he want to cash in? To whatever extent a guy like Sheldon Brookbank can cash in. I mean, is there a $2 million a year deal on the table for Brookbank somewhere? And if it's in a place like Florida or Texas where there's no state income tax, that's even better. Or does he want to stay and just be a part of a winner and make $1 million or $1.2 million? I think at this point it's entirely up to him, because the Blackhawks have made it very clear to him that they would like him back, but have him back at basically the same pay rate and in the same position that he was in. So it's entirely up to him. My guess would be, if he gets a nice offer from someone that can say to him, well, no, we want you to play every game, my guess would be that he would move on.
Yeah, I just wonder if he'll get that offer. He just didn't get a lot of opportunity to showcase what he can do, and is he going to prove in the limited time he played that he's worth $2 million or whatever he's thinking he's worth?
Well, I mean, that's just me thinking out loud. I mean, the free agency class, the one thing about this free agency class is that it doesn't have a lot of depth. It doesn't have a lot of quality. And I think that's one, and very wisely on Gary Bettman and Bill Daly's behalf, that the NHL really stood firm on keeping that upper limit number low as they could. Because, I mean, really what that upper limit number is, there's an equation that's very clearly defined in the collective bargaining agreement that determines what the upper limit is. But the NHL and the Players Association then have to sit down and work out player escrow, which is what makes that final upper limit number flexible. And of course, the players wanted it, at least initially, in general, the players want that number to be as high as it can be, but the players also don't want to throw too much money into escrow, which is money that's held out of their check until the end of the season, when projected revenues are either met or they fall short, If projected revenues fall short, the players lose money. And as successful as the NHL claimed to be last year, evidently reports are that the players lost 9% of their paychecks last year. So, there's, I think it was very wise on Bettman's part to keep that, that salary cap number below 70. But I mean, because of the lack of quality in the free agency class at defense, especially, I mean, it's really across the board. But I mean, a guy like Brookbank played for Chicago, played on a Stanley Cup champion. I mean, look at what Brian Burke said. I think it was Brian Burke after requiring Brandon Bollig. He said, "Well, Brandon Bollig's won a Stanley Cup. We want guys like that in our room," and that was valuable to them. Now look at Sheldon Brookbank, who in stretches for the Blackhawks played very well this year. For a third pair guy, and he's flexible. He's a guy that doesn't cause problems in the room. He goes with the flow. If you ask him to play forward, he plays forward. He doesn't bat an eye. Teams will look at that and they will be like, we could really use this guy on our team. He'd be great for our room. And that's where a guy gets a little bit more money than what you would perhaps think he would. So I think it's very possible that he hits two.
And you brought up a good point, Chris, is that this draft class, this free agent class is especially weak at defense. And that's where I think the Blackhawks could leverage this because, if you move Oduya or you move Leddy, you can actually potentially get something decent from it because there's nothing. What else is there available for these teams that are trying to go out and get somebody?
Right. Maybe that's Stan Moment's other line of thinking when it came to moving a guy like Oduya at the draft. Maybe he thought, well, once these teams, look at what the prices are for UFAs, I got a guy in Johnny Oduya who's very dependable, played, solid for me, and again, Stanley Cup champion, veteran, not a high maintenance player. Maybe there's more value, on July 15th than there was on June 26th.
Yeah, and so I guess the other big story is that it would have came out that Taves and Kane are both looking for $12 million a year. Do you think that's something they're legitimately looking for, or do you think that's something they're throwing out to kind of position that they're just because they were drafted Blackhawks and they were drafted together? I mean, not drafted together. They played together. They signed their contracts together. That they're not just going to necessarily just sign with the Blackhawks for whatever they're offered.
Two things. Number one, I'm pretty sure that a number like that was thrown out in the real discussions between the Blackhawks and the Taves and Kane. Both players are represented by the same agent. I'm positive that for all parties involved want both players making the same. But I think the reason why that $12 million number became public is because it's going to fall quite short of that. And that will look favorably upon Taves and Kane. Now, I mean, I think all along I've kind of looked at 9.5, 9.25 as the number that they would come in at. So when I saw that 12 million get public, that was immediately what I thought. I said, well, they've obviously come to an agreement on the number, and it falls way short of that, because again, the Blackhawks are a lot about public manipulation, and that 12 million number, that I don't know that came from the Blackhawks, but I know some of this Patrick Sharp stuff is coming from the Blackhawks. So I mean, who knows where the number came from, but the fact that it's out there, it could be from the agent side. It could be the agent being like, all right, we've already settled on 9.5, and I don't know that they have or not. But it's with both sides, the way they're talking, it just leads me to believe that the deal's already done. You got to remember that they're really not supposed to be able to negotiate until July 1st, and it's not July 1st yet. I find it hard to believe that this deal isn't all but done, and one side or the other floated that 12 million, you know what the initial reaction is going to be. The initial reaction is going to be these players are greedy. What are Taves and Kane doing? Do they want to win? Are they trying to break up the Blackhawks? All those things that if you spend time on social media, you probably read, right?
Oh, absolutely. You've seen that. And, it's on one hand, people way overreact to things. The other hand is, you try to wade through what's BS and what's legit.
But my point is that when the real number comes out, when the final number, when the contracts are signed and announced, it'll fall way short of that because it will. Number one, because it has to. And people will be like, "Oh wow, they didn't try to rob the Blackhawks. They're not trying to, you know what I'm saying? It's a lot of this is, public relations." So
I mean, on some levels it has to be. It's because once Old Man Wirtz died and this new regime came in to run this team, it's a big business and it's a popular sport again in the city, and they have to keep that machine well oiled. So you take a guy like Patrick Sharp, who's very popular among the fans, and if you feel like you're going to have to move him, you sort of have to slander him a little bit, so you have ammunition for when fans backlash a little bit. It's almost it's a game within a game.
Yeah, and but the other thing I would say too for Blackhawks fans, and you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have two of the best players in the world and then expect that they're going to play for below what their value is. I mean, that's not. I mean, it's really hard to sit people down sometimes and explain that this is a business, and it's a business from both sides. The NHLPA is going to want Taves and Kane to get as much as they possibly can within reason. The NHLPA's understanding of the situation that the players want to play together, they want to continue to win, but they also need to get real good money, because that's better for everybody, right? I can't imagine that the PA was excited with what Sidney Crosby signed for in Pittsburgh, but agents and everybody can go, well, he got a lifetime deal and he wanted to keep the Penguins together. That's an exceptionary deal, but it's the market's changed since Sidney Crosby signed his contract too. And that's another thing that people don't understand, is that when the cap goes up every year, what players signed for 2 years ago when the salary cap was $8 million less than it is now, players aren't signing for the same. If you take the same player, put him in the same position 2 years later, when there's $8 million more available, they're not going to sign for the same. And, so that's why I keep coming at that 9.5 number. And just the fact that the 12 got floated makes me believe even more than that's where it's going to fall. I'm sure the Blackhawks started at about 8. Tatum Cave started at 12. And it, as most negotiations, you end up in the middle somehow.
I wonder if with that $12 million was floated, because that's the real cash number that Crosby's getting for next year.
Well, that's the one interesting thing I think about these two guys, these two Blackhawks contracts is what is going to be the term? I think the money's going to be what the money's going to be, because they're superstar players at the age that they're at, with 2 Stanley Cups under their belt, nearly a third. And I mean, the Blackhawks front and center, those two guys are on the marketing. They deserve to be paid. The money is unimportant to me almost. What I'm concerned about, what I'm interested in, is how long are those deals going to be? Number one, because of the average salary, and that's what affects the cap. But when are these guys going to become UFAs again? I think that's the most interesting thing to me. Do they sign lifetime contracts, or do they leave themselves open for the potential of becoming free agents again? And the other thing that I think that players like Duncan Keith, and I mean, there's a list of a ton of them out there who signed those lifetime deals to get those sweetheart salary cap numbers. Duncan Keith's still making $8 million a year, but his cap is 5.5. Well, what does that mean? That means on the back end of Duncan Keith's deal, he's not going to be making much money. And how happy is Duncan Keith going to be in 6 years when he's still an equivalent player to he is now and he's making pennies? He's not going to be very happy. And there's going to be a lot of players like that. Are Taves and Kane going to put themselves in the same position? I don't think so. So when do their deals come up? I think that's the most interesting thing that I can't wait to see when these deals get made public in the next 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Guess to circle back around with the players that the Blackhawks drafted is what's the Blackhawks' comfort level with drafting American-born players? Last year they did 5 of them, and this year another 5. Why do you think they're so comfortable with American players?
Well, Mark Kelly after the draft on Saturday, was asked a question that was basically along those lines, and he said that there was just a coincidence. I don't know about that. They certainly like the idea of players, and again, this goes back to what we talked about at the top, players that are a ways away. So they're comfortable with guys going to college. I had the question because of what was going on here with Kevin Hayes and the fact that I think that we're going to see more and more players, not in mass, but I think a couple players a year are going to go this, especially if it works out for Kevin Hayes. A couple more college players every year that actually do get through their four-year college term will go this Kevin Hayes route. So I was wondering whether or not the Blackhawks would shy away from college-bound players, but I don't think that they have a choice, Sean, because they're really looking at players that are 3-4 years down the road. And when you look at the situation that they have now, which you have these players like Peary and Moore, and they're just unhappy, not because they're in Rockford, but because they feel like they're being held back. If you project guys out more, if you're drafting guys that are projected to be at college 2-3 seasons, Mark Kelly, the Blackhawks, the guy who's actually doing the drafting, Mark Kelly, not Stan Bowman, is very comfortable, he said, with guys even going back to U.S. college or the U.S. junior program, which is a step back from the OHL and the WHL up in Canada. They're comfortable with drafting a player and then have them go back to the USHL, which has happened a few times in recent years. So they're looking at guys that are kind of farther out. So where are the top candidates? The top candidates are kids that are U.S. hockey bred. So you're looking at guys and still in high school, and they drafted, undersized defenseman in the Nick Leddy vein, Luke Snuggerud. I think I pronounced that correctly, but
I love that name, by the way.
Yeah, Eden Prairie kid. Coming out of high school, Starrett is another kid. A high school kid who's going to the USHL this year. 6'5" center, huge kid who is still another year away from college. So again, to answer your question, I think that it's just easier for them to draft U.S. kids that are headed to college that aren't going to be in Rockford for 3 or 4 years. And again, they're drafting kids with high ceilings that will take longer to develop because that's what fits their program right now. They don't have openings this year or even next year. They have openings 3 years down the road, years down the road, and certainly who knows what 2018, 2019, 2020 is going to look like. So I think that it's easier for them to draft U.S. kids that are far away. And it's the same thing with drafting kids that are in Sweden. I mean, the Blackhawks have 2 of their top amateur scouts are based in Sweden. That's why they draft a lot of kids from Sweden. Every year they draft 1 or 2 kids from Sweden, and that's the reason. But the other thing is they pick kids that are in the junior programs in Sweden that still have a lot of room to grow. They're going to play maybe another year of junior hockey in Sweden. Then they'll jump up and play in the Sweden's equivalent of the NHL. And they'll play in that league for a year or two, and then they'll come to North America, probably start in Rockford. So again, they're looking for kids that are a ways away, so they're not focused on the Ontario Hockey League. And whereas like a guy like Mark McNeil and Philip Deneau, they were drafted, and 2 years later they're in Rockford. And now it's like everybody's like, when are these guys going to be in the NHL? I think that they're trying to push off expectations and let everything develop more naturally.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, because a lot of these kids, especially when you get farther down into the later rounds, I don't know anything about. So watching little bits of clips of them and reading some scouting reports and things, it's a ton of guys with a lot of high ceilings, and it's going to be interesting to see how they progress as they start developing into adult grown man bodies. I mean, some of these guys weigh 175 pounds, so it's and Sakura, the kid that they got in the 6th round, he's only 149 pounds. So he's got these kids as they grow into, develop their talent and grow into their bodies and develop, you see how they're going to progress, and it's going to be a little interesting. You sort of you look back at previous drafts to see where those guys have gone on in a few years. You look at like the 2010 draft is, Kent Simpson still in the AHL, looks pretty good. Joakim Nordstrom played at the big level. So it's Kevin Hayes is a guy that they want. So you see how these guys have progressed over the few years there.
I think overall the 2010 draft is amounting to be a disaster, but goaltenders take time, so we'll see on Ken Simpson. Simpson had a encouraging start to last year in Rockford, but then really it was terrible for the most part. It'll be interesting to see what they do in goal in Rockford this year. I would imagine that they're going to want to bring in a veteran, and then either Carruth or Simpson will be relegated to Indianapolis, which is where the Blackhawks' new ECHL affiliate is, the league below the AHL. That would seem to make more sense to me as far as that goes. But I mean, I don't like to handicap players as soon as they're drafted too much. I definitely read up on them. I'm going to sit down tonight to write about them all and do a post on the website. But, the only player that I didn't understand as much is the player that the Blackhawks drafted at 83, which is the kid Matt Iacopelli, who's a kid that's a late bloomer. He's a 20-year-old, but he's not a 20-year-old in the sense of when the Blackhawks drafted Andrew Shaw, and he got an AHL contract, and then not even halfway through the season, he got an NHL deal, he got promoted, and all. For the most part, after that, he was an NHL player. This is a kid who is a grown man who was playing as an overager in the USHL, scored 41 goals, is basically a man against boys in that league. And now at age, what he's going to be, well, he just turned 20. So at age 20, he's going to play at Western Michigan University. And, he's a player that doesn't have a well-rounded game. They're very high on his shot. He's got a quick release. They believe that he's a goal scorer. But I'm really apprehensive about this kid because, he didn't break out until he was a 20-year-old playing against 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. And so I wonder about that pick. But we'll wait and see. But I think overall, I looked at this draft going in, and you can identify, if you look at a Blackhawks depth chart organizationally, which I keep my own, but you looked at it and you said, well, what are their two areas of need? There are two areas of need. They need size and speed up front. And again, we're talking about 3-4 years down the road when we talk about these needs. Size and speed up front, and goaltending. And this wasn't a deep goaltender draft, but they did get one, and they did add a lot of size and speed up front. So I think for addressing organizational needs, I think it was a successful draft. Now, time will tell whether these players pan out. They traded up to get Nick Schmaltz because they thought that St. Louis was going to take him. But most people thought Nick Schmaltz was going to drop to where the Hawks were to begin with. So they did lose 2 draft picks. Well, one. They lost, a draft pick to move up to get a guy that they may have been able to get where they were to begin with. But they got the player that they wanted. They believed that it could be a Teravainen type of thing, where a player that shouldn't have dropped where he was ended up, and they got a gift. But we'll wait and see. But that's the fun of that's why I love covering the organization as a whole, because it's not necessarily that it's easy to just watch the NHL team, but you really get a great perspective of where the organization is going as a whole and how they operate and everything when you follow the whole thing. And it's just, every year it's just going to be interesting to keep an eye on these guys and watch their development. And it's fun when you do these shows and you revisit it. You in 2014 you go back and revisit the 2010 draft and what was said about those players and how it turned out. And the 2010 draft didn't work out, but we'll see about this one. They got size, they got speed, they got definitely guys that can snipe the puck. And 4 or 5 years from now, they're going to need that, because Sharp will be gone, Host will be gone, and they're going to need players to surround, presumably, Taves and Kane.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've mentioned this on the show before, is that when you have the NFL draft, is like the NFL is what I probably know the best. And when you look at the NFL draft, it's easy to see how players, turned out within a year or two. It's the progression time has gotten so short in the window of opportunity for these players. But then you look at like an NHL draft or a Major League Baseball draft, and you're doing the long haul. You are looking at guys that could not be ready for 4 or 5 years, and you're trying to project out that far. And so it's just like a completely different animal than drafting in basketball or football, where you expect these guys to come in day one and play for you. And so it's just, you have to really look back and it's really interesting to take a look back at 3, 4, 5 years and see how things looked when at the time, what you thought of these players when they were drafted, and then look what they've progressed to and where they're at now and what their future potential is.
Yeah, I mean, that's what makes it fun,
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing. And one more thing I wanted to ask you about is, I heard this morning, and I don't know how much truth is to or where it's coming from, but I saw a rumor floating out that the Blackhawks were interested in bringing Martin Brodeur in.
I mean, the Hawks have had interest, if you believe. I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, if you believe in that, where there's smoke, there's fire. The interest in Brodeur goes back a couple of years. I don't know. Would it benefit the Hawks for Antti Raanta to play in Rockford for a full year? I guess, but Antti Ranta's not 21 years old. I mean, you're talking about a goaltender that played significant time in Europe in pro leagues. He's 25. I mean, how much better is he really going to get? But he did sign a 2-year deal. I'm pretty sure it's guaranteed money. Excuse me. But the money that he's making, the one benefit that the Hawks have, even though he'd have to clear waivers, which is always a concern, the money that he's making, it's not so much that it'll count against the cap if he's sent to the minors. But I don't know. I just don't see. I mean, Marty Brodeur's a legend, and I guess you couldn't. I mean, it wouldn't. my issue with this goes back to Joe Quenneville and the whole. If you have a guy, and I think pretty much everybody would understand that Marty Brodeurs north of 40 years old. He's not a Marty Brodeur in his prime. So you'd have to ask yourself, well, what's the benefit of having him there then? Is he that much better than Ronta? I don't think so. And then you have to understand, it's like if you have that guy, Marty Brodeur, sitting there, and Corey Crawford has a bad week. I mean, you know what it's like in Chicago when a player has a bad week. Everybody wants to replace him.
Yep.
So do you really want to put yourself in that position where you have a legend like Marty Brodeur, who Corey Crawford idolizes, sitting behind him, where there's going to be always going to be this movement to like, I'll put Brodeur in there. I mean, I don't see. Number one, I think Marty should hang it up. Number one, but so he's does he give you value? I mean, what is the point of that signing? I just, to me, I don't get it.
The only way I could see it making any sense is if Brodeur is going to sign for very little money for a chance to win one more cup before he hangs it up, and if he can actually be like a positive influence to Corey Crawford for those times when he seems to have those mental lapses and give up soft goals, is to help Crawford for the long haul. Well, if he can do that, great. If he can't, then there's no sense in bringing him.
Well, Marty Brodeur for a long time had a stigma attached to him, which is more than a reality, that he's not the hardest worker, that he's got a lot of God-given ability, and he's relied on that. And I don't know that the Blackhawks necessarily want that in their room. Maybe he's changed, because when you get older, to stay in the game, you do have to change. But, I don't know. I on one hand, it's like if you could sneak Ronta back through waivers and into Rockford and let him play there for a year, yeah, I guess. I mean, because the Blackhawks, and I say this over and over again, the Blackhawks, it's scary what their goaltending depth looks like over the long haul. So Corey Crawford better be great for 6 years, because this is the first year of his contract, and he better be great for 6 years because they've got nothing coming, as far as it looks like at this moment in time. So I guess it would benefit to have Ronta and Rockford just playing and perhaps elevating his game to a level where if something happened to Crawford, you'd feel comfortable with playing Ronta. But I don't see where the Brodeur things works. You talk about money. I mean, is he going to come in and play for $750,000?
So welcome to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Our friend Gary, welcome to the show. NBA draft. What do you think?
I think the best way to describe it is nothing really unexpected except for what the Sacramento Kings did. Other than that, everything expected, including the Bulls trade. Not a shocker. So yeah, I mean, I think it was what it was, and I think all the people who predicted what they did were pretty close. At least in the lottery picks, that is. So
I mean, it was pretty evident that the Bulls were going to try to get a shooter. I thought it would be Stauskas, but
he went to Sacramento, and he could. Who did they draft last year? And they McLemore, and they can hang out together.
Yeah, it was I think there was a big reach on Stauskas. Not a big reach, but there was a reach.
There was one more, but I was actually hearing rumors that it might happen before the draft. That was Boston drafting Marcus Smart. But that kind of, with all the Rajon Rondo news that it's been popping up the last few weeks, I think it was kind of both a safety net and looking at the future, and that Rondo isn't their point guard of the future.
Well, I mean, the issue is that they're in a rebuilding mode, and Rajon Rondo is now, and also coming off an injury. So what's the sense in having him around when they're still going to rebuild?
And
May as well.
you forget you forgot to add one more thing. He's also not a team player.
Well, the NBA is not really a team sport except for the team that won it all.
Yeah, but the Rajon Rondo has been complaining for many years when he wasn't the guy. He was complaining. Doesn't It seems like nothing's changed. I think he's a dirty player. A lot of fans of teams across the country would agree with me. Besides Boston, of course, it's not shocking that he's in the predicament he's in, and the Celtics are doing the right thing, I think.
Looking at the Bulls, is they got Doug McDermott. They traded their 16-19.
It's Dougie McBuckets. That's
what happens to Jimmy Buckets? Are they brothers from different colored mothers?
maybe, but one actually is known for making buckets, and the other one, an announcer just started calling him it. So there's a difference.
Let's put a hypothetical in here. What if you could cross Jimmy Buckets with Dougie McBuckets, and you could get a player that could shoot the lights out and play defense?
Won't his name be Michael Jordan?
Probably. Well, 6'8" might be LeBron.
Yeah, it might be LeBron. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Bulls trade their 16 and 19 picks, move up to 11, and I think at that point we were. Who did you think that they were going to be? Did you think McDermott was going to fall to them?
Once Ilgauskas was drafted, I think he was 8th. I think they started acting, knowing that McDermott was the only other person out. Because they could have gotten, we talked before, they could have gotten Gary Harris Jr. There was some interest there, but he's kind of a project. And they wanted a guy that can come into the league now and shoot. So once Ilgauskas, I can't even say his name, Ilgauskas.
Just Stauskas.
Sorry. Was taken, I think they really pushed hard, and that's why they took what's his name, Anthony, I forgot his last name. They took a contract on from Denver that they just wanted to dump. So it wasn't like the Bulls right now, as it is, aren't saving any money. Hopefully they can turn around and trade that contract, but they didn't do this move just to save money on like first round draft picks. They did it because they really wanted McDermott, and
it doesn't hurt that they're also going to save a little money.
Well, they're not until they turn around this. You're by your computer. Look up his name, Anthony. They're going to lose money this year unless they turn around and trade him. And there's this whole like collective bargaining issue where he can't be part of a group trade. They're over the salary cap. Some really weird stuff that I'm not smart enough to understand.
Yeah, I hate stuff like that where it's just so complicated that you need like a lawyer to figure that stuff.
So, but they can trade him, and I think Garth has even that they are going to do something with him, whether he like kind of made the notion that something big is going to happen next week. So, should be exciting.
I mean, the one thing I think we can both safely assume is that by drafting McDermott, that Love is off the table.
No, why would you assume that?
Because they're similar style players.
Kind of. I don't think McDermott is a power forward. I think I know they say he's a tweener, but I don't think he's going to be down low. I think he is going to be that guy who is either the spot up 3 shooter or runs off a pick. I don't going to be banging bodies down low. So
no, but I mean, he's 6'8". He's gonna have to go down a little bit.
The Bulls have a player who is 6'9", and who can shoot threes? And do you ever see him down low? And Mike Dunleavy Jr.
Touche.
So no, I mean, I think if you gave the argument of, well, they had 2 draft picks and went down to 1. As okay, maybe then they're not looking at Love now. I would agree more with that than the fact that they drafted McDermott, because those 2 first round draft picks are have a lot more weight than 1. That being said, I don't think the Twins, the Timberwolves, are looking to trade Love unless it's this amazing trade, which is why they insisted on Klay Thompson, and rightfully so. Golden State decided, hey, maybe we shouldn't trade this guy because he could be really good, and we don't have to pay him for X number of years.
Maybe they'll want to trade straight up for Anthony Randolph.
That's who the guy is. Thanks. No, I just think that Minnesota wants a lot for him, and from what I read, the Bulls offered a package, and you forget they still have Mirotic. That's a great trade bait, and they have Sacramento's first round pick that I think it's like top 10 or 12 protected for next year. So I mean, they still have some good trade chips that they can still get Love. Do I think this means they're going after Melo first and foremost? Completely think it does. To get that outside spot up shooter. I think they're looking for a scorer as well so McDermott can complement that.
Yeah, I mean, it all adds up to me that they're going to push hard for Carmelo Anthony. Whether that be, I doubt it'll be a sign and trade, but I think they'll just try to straight up lure him.
Yeah, I think the sign and trade depends on New York. From I was reading up some today. Now that Melo's a free agent, he could go back to New York and say, "I'm going to sign with the Bulls." So I suggest you work out a deal, or as I'm going to sign with them because I want to make more money. And New York could balk at that. It's kind of like who's going to blink first. So.
But if you're New York, you're stupid to not do it.
Yeah.
To at least get something without having him walk away for nothing.
Yeah, and then from what the article said, they're you can say goodbye to Jimmy Buckets. So we only have one bucket on our team. And Boozer's expiring contract would be part of that, but then the Sacramento pick, I think they were talking about too. So then
who plays defense on the team then?
Well, they were talking about Shumpert being part of the trade as well.
He's got broken wheels.
I know. We'd have the bionic tandem at guard, right?
Wait. We'd have one guy that came back way too soon, one guy that just wouldn't come back.
Yeah. So, which I don't
ridiculous
knock New York for doing, right? They have this guy and he's under contract, and they're like, well, he was pretty bad last year when he came back. Let's see if we can get rid of him and get a guy who can actually defend, who fits really nicely into Phil Jackson's system and Jimmy Butler. So, but you have to do it, right? You don't have.
You got to do something. You got to do something to get
Melo.
You
got to do it. It sucks. I know. But the good thing is you would still have Taj, right? And everyone is this huge infatuation over Taj Gibson, even though I've said before I think he's their biggest trade, chip in general. You keep Taj, maybe you keep Mirotic too, and then you have Melo, and then you have Rose and Noah, and everyone's happy. We win multiple championships, and LeBron James and the Heat are pissed off.
You mean LeBron James and the Cavaliers?
No, they're doing that so they can get Kyle Lowry. I would be shocked if Lowry doesn't go to the Heat.
Because apparently the other two of the big three are opting out as well.
Yep, they are doing that. They are going to take a pay cut, and kudos to them for doing it. Realizing that they need, a young, really good point guard to help them out. I think the Mario Chalmers Norris Cole experiment is coming to an end.
I just want to point out that, if you really want to talk taking pay cuts, is Tim Duncan plays for like $10 million a year.
Yeah, Joakim Noah is playing for 12. I mean, yeah.
Well, Tim Duncan's going to be a Hall of Famer.
But I mean, Noah could have gotten a max contract. I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to compare the two. I'm just saying that there are players that do take.
Well, I'm just saying that it's sure LeBron James will take a pay cut, but he's still going to be making a ton of money.
Mil, yeah. No, I agree. it is what it is. If I were them, I'd do that too. Otherwise, if I were LeBron, I'd go get paid nothing and go somewhere else.
He's like, the Spurs want to sign me?
Well, if LeBron was, I was watching, I think, NBA TV. I have a lot of time where I just either listen to radio or watch TV or read papers. I have no life. Um, and like one of the options they were saying was this guy was on. They were interviewing a guy from Cleveland saying that he thinks that LeBron will eventually be a Cav again, but he won't be this year. So what I would take from that is if this guy truly has his resources right, LeBron's not going to sign a 4 or 5 year contract. He's going to probably sign a 2 to 3 year contract. And if he wants to make the most money and take a pay cut, that's what he does too, you know? Because then he could sign another 3-year contract at age 32, which LeBron James at 32 is still probably going to be pretty good unless he pulls a Derrick Rose.
Which I don't see him doing.
I don't either. Or Dwayne Wade. Not just Derrick. Dwayne Wade also has knee problems in his 30s. So
yeah, I mean, point guards have bum wheels after a while.
yeah, it's because they all work out too much, to be honest. That's my philosophy. I'm sticking to it. Back in John Stockton in the 80s, John Stockton never blew his knees out. You know why? He never lifted like this. He never got his body in such a. I mean, he was in great shape. Don't get me wrong, and he looked a little ripped, but that was all like basketball ripped. That wasn't muscles bulging out of his arm, biceps, and just like, let's go to the beach, kind of ripped, which you see a lot now. So I think these guys are just too strong, and their upper body is so strong that their lower body just can't take the pressure.
You're saying that with McDermott signing, that there's still a possibility of Love. How does this offense go with Love, McDermott, a hopefully rejuvenated Rose, and Noah?
So I think if either Love or Melo come, I do not see McDermott being a starter this year at any time. I see him coming off the bench. So really, I think there's two paths for McDermott. If they don't get Melo or Love, I think McDermott becomes one of the go-to scorers. If they get one of those guys, I think they're going to bring on McDermott slowly, kind of like how the Bulls brought Tony Kukoc slowly in the 90s. And you'll see McDermott kind of grow into his own 3-4 years from now.
What do you think about McDermott as a draft pick?
So personally, I think he's the right fit for the Bulls. There's a lot of people that don't like him. He gets that cliche white guy, slow, can't defend, 2 left feet perspective, but
No, I don't see that. I watched a bunch of film on
saying everything that I've been seeing on him is not that at all. So
he's not explosive. He's a very good athlete if you watch him in the gym, but watching him play, he's not that explosive. But defense-wise, he's always in good position. He's never out of position.
I mean, but
he's just not as fast as, he's not a naturally gifted defender. But he's very coachable defending.
Yeah.
Which I think is going to work okay with Tibbs.
Again, I think for the Bulls, it's a great pick. I think he was like 1A, like with Stauskas 1B. I think either one of those guys are who the Bulls were looking at. And either one of those guys fit. I think Stauskas has a bigger future, but I think either one of those kind of fit what the Bulls wanted. I like the pick. I was happy with it. I would have not been happy if they drafted a European player that's not coming for a few years, or they drafted in a position where they didn't need, like they drafted. What if they drafted a center, or just a big in general? I'm happy they said their need is they needed a shooter. They went out and got a shooter, and hopefully this will end all the Jimmer for that talk, because that guy is not going to see much playing time next year, barring injuries.
No, because McDermott basically is going to do the same thing except taller and better.
Yeah, And
because I mean, watching McDermott play, he could shoot from anywhere.
yeah, that was the thing.
I mean,
when I read the scouting report and saw some of the stuff about him, that was the thing. They did stats on where he, like, where NBA, like all basketball players have comfort spots where they tend to shoot from. McDermott was all over the place. He literally could shoot anywhere. And
yeah, it was crazy watching him, like whether it be spot up shooting or coming off of a pick and roll and shooting, or what it was really cool was on fast breaks is trailing behind and pulling up for a three. And I mean, it's one thing to be able to just go off a dribble, step up and shoot, or to spot shoot, but to be able to go on from a full on sprint to stop shoot, it takes a little bit of practice and skill. And
Love
it was just like
good at that, wasn't he?
Yeah, but he was 2'4". We got a guy that's 6'8".
Yeah, and the other thing about shooting that I read up that I really like is they say he's got that like one-legged shot really down really low, the kind of Dirk Nowitzki, like not a fadeaway, but like kind of like off. I
just like how you keep comparing to white guys.
Yeah, you're gonna mention a text I sent earlier?
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Okay. I know this is a Chicago sports team. It's our sports show, but I just want to mention really quick is what the hell were the 76ers doing in this draft? Did they let fans pick?
No,
Did they pick names out of a hat?
I don't, of all teams to draft Embiid, I think that was a good pick for them, and here's why. I think they're going to purposely tank next year too, and they're just building up. They got that European guy too in the draft that's not going to be here for a couple years, and they got Noel, and they got all these guys. Yes, there's a huge risk, but the reward is like they're not going anywhere, and they know that.
He's a 7-foot guy that has foot and back issues. What happens to that?
Yeah, no, I mean,
this is like it's like Bill Walton, Yao Ming, and what's his
Bill
face?
Walton had a couple really good years in NBA. A couple. Even Ralph Sampson had a couple good years in NBA before he. I mean, the thing is, the kid, he's only like, what is he, 19? I mean,
yeah, but he already has serious back and foot issues.
No, I know. I mean, what are you gonna like? Okay, so if I'm them, if you're not the way I see it, if you're not getting Wiggins or Parker, no one else there screams superstar.
No, that's why you trade up. You throw the house at everything to trade up to get Parker.
But I don't think Cleveland or Milwaukee. I mean, by the way, I have so much more respect for Parker after watching that draft. Just how he handled and how it appears on the surface that he's happy he's going to Milwaukee because it's close to home, and the organization has done everything they can to kind of like, put the red carpet off for him and how he's their future. And like, I hope that situation works because Milwaukee's had so many losing seasons, and to have a guy like that who appears on the surface to have a good head on his shoulders, he could have pulled the Eli Manning route and complained and moaned about going to Milwaukee and stuff. So,
I mean, that's a situation that could have happened, But I'm glad that the things seem to have worked out. 1 and 2 seem to be places where they were meant to fit, and after that was a little bit of a crapshoot. But I think the Bulls as a whole, I think it was the right thing to do is to trade up. Is what were they really going to get at 16 and 19? That would have. I mean, again, he's a project. We want pieces now. This is a win now thing, and to be honest, let's put let's read the writing on the wall. Is if Garpax come up with emptiness the second time when there's a big free agent class in 4 years, what happens to them?
I think the Bulls still are the number one ticket sales team in the NBA, and life goes on.
You know what? How long does that keep happening? When they don't win?
Until they. I mean, the unfortunate problem is
because do we remember the the dark ages after Pippen and
Yeah,
Jordan left and before Rose came.
That's what I was gonna say, Sean. The unfortunate problem is even if they don't win, they'll still be a very competitive and good team. And as long as they're a very competitive and good team, they're going to do well as far as attendance, and guard packs are technically then doing a good job because only half their job is to win a championship. The other half is to put a competitive team on the court continuously. And besides a couple years here and there, since 2003, the Bulls have had a pretty good team. We've seen a lot of winning basketball in Chicago since 2003. It's going to be really hard for them to turn into the Bucks or the Cavaliers or the 76ers, or the Magic even. And even like some of the like Sacramento, or even to have a season like LA, the Lakers had last year. It's going to be really hard for the Bulls to do that. Because you see, they got killed by injuries the last couple years, and look what they've done. If you as a fan want to see the end of guard packs, you got to hope they lose more than 35 games in a season.
But I mean, that does look bad. Is if there's a huge free agent class twice, and you have a boatload of money and pieces in place of a playoff team,
sure,
and you can't lure any of them.
Well, I mean, but to the common fan, you can get upset about that. But to the realistic fan who understands that it's also a business besides, it's these players have agents, they have lawyers themselves, they have all these people that look out for them. And the thing that's really unfortunate about the NBA is it's not surprising you see these star players go to Florida and Texas.
I mean, there's no state income tax.
And that's a huge deal. And you don't see a star player going to, like, everyone was shocked when Al Jefferson went to Charlotte, right? It was sort of like that. What? Did that happen? Oh, they paid him a lot too. Wow. And I think that's the thing that these guys don't care about. If they want to win a championship, they'll take less money at the end of their career. And Gary Payton said something about that, how it just, this whole forming like the big three and luring other players to play with them.
He did it too.
He did it at the end of his career, but
he still did it.
In the 90s, he wanted to beat John Stockton. That was his goal. He didn't want to play in the same team as John Stockton. He wanted to beat him because that was the best, and he wanted to be the best. And that's basically what he said. And I mean, you don't see that nowadays because it's all about making money first, and then, okay, let me try to win at the end.
But I'm just saying, there's the two guys that are huge critics of doing this is Barkley and Gary Payton, and they both did it.
Yeah, I mean,
granted, it's not, they didn't do it in the primes of their career, but they still did it.
Yeah, I mean,
so they should lay off a little bit.
But I actually have a different perspective. I think that they're justified just because they didn't do it in their prime. They did it when they were a shell of what they used to be. I mean, come on, Gary Payton. How bad was he when he went to the Lakers?
Oh, Gary Payton was a shell, but Charles Barkley was still a decent player.
He was but he wasn't the guy. Like when he went,
he wasn't 76ers Charles.
Well,
Barkley,
he wasn't Phoenix Charles Barkley either.
But he was still at least a decent player. He could post up, he could rebound, he was still a decent player. Had veteran presence.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind that if you're past your prime. The thing that was unfortunate with Miami is it was kind of like a combination, I think. I think that's what rubs me the wrong way. It was, here you got these three guys that are in their prime doing it, and then you have a bunch of these other players that are good role players past their prime and doing it. So what you had was this team of a bunch of players that were good and wanted to win a championship, and that's what I mean. Let's face it, the big three didn't enable the Heat to win 2 championships. It was everyone else. It was Ray Allen, Shane Battier. Those are the guys that won the championships.
having the big three was pretty important. It was.
Oh,
I mean, they still needed. It's in the end, you need a team to win a championship. Look at the Spurs.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree.
I mean, Spurs. Everyone talks about about their big three.
Yeah,
But the thing is that they're just a really complete team.
they have a lot. They have really good role players. Leonard is coming into his own. Even that center, what's his name? I forgot his name. He had a great year last year. And then of course they got our old friend Marco Bellinelli. Even their backup point guards are contributing. It's great to watch them.
Are you talking about Diaw?
Yeah, no, not Dio.
A Splitter?
Yeah, Splitter. Yeah, that guy. How did they get him? He was doing a second round or something, and look what he's.
He looks like Buffalo Bill from Sounds of the Lambs.
Well, I mean, they just was it Tiago Splitter? Tiago Splitter's his name.
Yeah.
We're
sure a great big fat person.
So I mean, kudos to them. It's fun to watch them. Jealous.
It rubs the lotion on the skin.
Nice. It is what it is, and the Bulls can just try to make the best of the situation. If they don't get Carmelo or Love, there's still good other options like Trevor Ariza can even bring back Luol Deng. Mirotic.
You're just all on the Luol Deng
because they can get him so cheap.
Can they?
$8 million a year, maybe. Like, he's not a bad option C, is what I'm saying. If you bring over Mirotic, and you're saying, okay, Mirotic is our power forward of the future. And
how excited would Tibbs be if they brought Luol Deng
I know,
back?
right? So,
he would just be doing cartwheels in the Birdo Center.
So then you have a starting lineup of Rose, Butler, Deng, Taj, and Noah, and you have Mirotic and McDermott coming off the bench. That's not bad. That 2-3 years ago, we're talking that was good enough to win a championship. So I'm definitely not against that. Granted, love to have Melo.
Of course, you want Carmelo, but you need to score. I mean, last year they scored 22 points a game less than the number one scoring team. 22 points. It's a lot of points.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's why they drafted McDermott. I mean, that's what you get with Mirotic, too. He's a scorer. He can shoot the three. He can post up. People relate his game. They would if you were talking about current NBA players, they relate his game to Kevin Love and Ryan Anderson. I'm like, I would take either one of those guys. They're both really good. Ryan Anderson on NBA Jam lights it up from the arc. So, Mirotic could be that score. Like, that's the thing. It's like everyone's like trying to say that, oh, it's this or nothing. And it's like, well, Mirotic could be a scorer. McDermott could be a scorer. That kind of fills the piece. That's not a horrible plan B. It's not what we would want, but it's not like there's some benefits to that because you keep Taj, you keep Jimmy. Financially, your team isn't so over the salary cap. There's some positives to that. And then if Mirotic becomes a superstar, like, that's great. There's your three, So it's just you can't get too down if they don't get Melo or Love. It's not the end of the world. And something good could still come from what they're doing. So that's why I think overall Garpax are doing a really good job. They're going for Melo, it's obvious. But I mean, there is a plan B, and that plan B still puts the Bulls at a level of one of the top teams in the East.
All I have to say is that no matter how this shapes up, is if you ask Thibodeau about the team when it's all said and done, this is what he's going to say.
Hey, we have enough. We have enough.
Stay up. Stay up. Stay up.
My only fear with Thibodeau is he doesn't have a heart attack in the middle of a game and just drop.
Earlier, you texted me, and you brought up a point how everybody compares McDermott to somebody that's white because he's white.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so true.
So this is how they
you
came.
know,
I was driving. I played baseball today, and I'm driving back from my baseball game, and they're talking about it. I'm like, this would be a good conversation to bring to Sean too. So
Yeah, so it's really true. But then you said, what black player would you compare him to? And I've been thinking about it since you texted me, and I was like, I'm like, oh, this is easy. But then I was like, is it easy?
no, it's not.
No, my first initial reaction was I was going to say Reggie Miller.
No.
Then I was like, no, I don't know.
I have a few. I have one that I think is the guy you can compare him to, but I have a few that are like honorable mentions. So I don't know if you want to go back, and if you have a few too, we can go back and forth and talk about it.
You could go first.
Okay. The first one discretion isn't fully black. Charlie Villanueva, big guy in his prime, could shoot the three, lights out. But I'm saying him first because he's at the bottom of my list.
I'm still thinking. I still have no idea. I'm terrible at this. I'm just thinking who's slow, can't really jump, but could shoot the lights.
Okay. The next time if you want, I could just tell you my list of 5 because he was 5. I could just go up the list.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
4 would be Quentin Richardson.
Except he could jump out of the building.
Yes, but most of his career he didn't. He did it for the first few years, but later on he really just became that guy who
Wait, was Dan Marley black?
No, he wasn't.
Darn. Because I was going to say Dan Marley.
No, but Quentin had a good leaping and quickness abilities like for the first 5 years of his career, but most of his career he was really.
And he went to DePaul.
Yes, and I've played basketball and bowled against him.
I tutored him once.
Anyways, so he comes to mind just because the last 8 years of his career, predominantly a 3-point shooter. So he came to mind. 3 is one that everyone you've said and everyone. Paul Pierce of now, not Paul Pierce in his prime, but Paul Pierce of now. 2, this is an interesting one because he's a little taller, but if you look at most of his career, yeah, it makes sense. Rasheed Wallace. You never saw Rasheed Wallace banging in the inside, right? You always saw him kind of taking a 3. And the number 1 person I would compare him to
was Danny Ferry black?
No, he couldn't shoot either. Why would you even bring him up?
Danny Ferry was awesome
in college. Anyways, no, it wasn't Danny Ferry. I think a good black person comparison to Dougie McBuckets is Rashard Lewis.
Oh, that is a good one.
I think it's dead on, actually. Rashard Lewis was a guy that never was very quick. He's 6'10", could shoot lights out. So that's my
Yeah, that is a good list. That is a good list.
I mean, you could exclude Charlie Villanueva based on the subject because he, to some extent, but I mean, he was a good shooter, and he's part black. That kind of counts, right? He's got no eyebrows, or that's mean. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying that Danny Ferry in the 99-2000 season shot 45% from the 3 line.
Because he took like 10 shots.
He took 75.
That's not a lot at all. Jimmy
Buckets took all right, let's go. Let's go. He shot 41% in 94-95, and he shot 233.
That's better. That's like that would be a better stat to throw at me than 75.
I'm just saying, Danny Ferry was the man. I remember once playing in the DePaul. Was
Is that your dog, by the way?
Yeah, that's my dog whining. She wants something or other. What was the field house that was like right next to Wishfield.
Yeah, something.
I remember I used to play
I know, I
basketball
did
there.
too. I
And
got dunked on by Stephen Hunter. Scariest moments of my life.
I played with Big Bo. What's up? What do you know about that? Anyways, people used to say that I played like Danny Ferry, and I didn't know
Nice.
how to take it.
Well, if it's any consolation, they called me the Rat. So, and Willie Coleman, do you remember Willie Coleman? Would
Yeah.
always pick me on his team, and I'd get so upset because Willie Coleman is a guy that you would hustle and get a steal or get a rebound somehow, and he'd say, "Here, give me the ball," and he'd shoot a half court shot, and he did that continuously. And I was like, I got to the point where, no, I'm not giving you the ball. I'm going to go shoot myself. Then he would come up to me and take the ball from me and then shoot a half court shot and make it. It was so frustrating playing. And once they realized that I hustled and I was fast, every time they were there and I was there, they would pick me to play on their team. And I hated it. I never wanted to be on their team. Stupid DePaul basketball. They wanted to play with the locals for fun. I don't know, like they got a kick out of it or something.
The sad part is a lot of them weren't very good.
I had human sexuality with a couple.
Was that even a
yes,
class?
that was. It was. It's.
DePaul had some ridiculous classes.
I'm trying to remember. It like filled some sort of like. You know, you'd take some like social or social class, societal classes or something, and like most of them are like religious classes, and then here's this class, human sexuality, and it like fell into it. Don't ask me how. So I took it. It was a summer class, and I took it as a night class, and and a couple of the basketball team guys were in it. They probably took it for the same reason I did. Oh, this is required. This could be as one of the credits for society or a social class or whatever. Let me take it because it's human sexuality. You know, who cares? I would always come in. You know this. I wasn't a very punctual student.
No, I had a class with
and yeah, I just stopped showing up to that. I would come in. It was a 3-hour class. I'd come in about 45 minutes into it. And when you walk in and it's class has been in session for 45 minutes, you just go in and sit in the back. I would sit in the back, and all the basketball team was in the back. So they knew that they got to know me because I'm that guy who came in 45 minutes late every time and just sat with them because I didn't want to make a scene. And then I would fall asleep in class, so they'd kind of laugh at me for that. So besides being punctual, I had no attention span. I mean, the ADHD is kicking in. I should never have taken a 3-hour class at any point in my life. My story is, one time we left class, we left class, I think, early for some reason, and it was still kind of light out. And I walk out, and I see one of my friend Kevin Hart's ex-girlfriend. So I was like, and she was with one of her girlfriends. So I was like, "Hey, want to give me a ride home?" And she's like, I mean, she said yes. And the reason why I kind of paused just now is because this is Lincoln Park, right? I lived all the way in Rogers Park then. So she was willing to drive me all the way to Rogers Park. So I didn't have to take the train. So I was cool. I hop in the car. And as I hop in the car, of course, the basketball guys are strolling out. They see me hop in a car with 2 girls. I come back the next class, and they start asking me questions, saying I was a pimp, saying that, oh, this is the right class for me because obviously I'm good with the girls and stuff. And I became friends with them, particularly Inde Avery, who I was dating a cheerleader, and he ended up hitting on her while I was dating her, and I found out about it. And of course, my reaction was like, dude, Inde, you hit on my girlfriend. That is so cool. So that's my silly bragging about myself story.
A true story is I played 3-on-3 against a team that had Antoine Walker on it, and I had to guard him once 1-on-1, and it didn't go so well. because he's Antoine Walker.
But
And
this was still small Anton Walker. It wasn't big fat Anton Walker, was it?
no, this was pre NBA.
So he was skinny Anton Walker.
Yeah,
Oh.
and this was skinny me too. So it was. I've never felt so embarrassed at anything in my whole life because he just drove on me and then dunked over the top. He could have gone around me very easily and dunked it. He decided to go over the top of me and
Sean,
dunk it.
he probably didn't even see you.
That's a possibility too.
Well,
I was whiting in his way.
well, I mean, my biggest DePaul basketball moments are I played against the legend and with the legend a lot. And please say you know who the legend is.
Is it Big Bo?
No, Larry Lee, the legend. Come on.
I don't know who that is. Who's Larry Lee?
Von Steuben's Larry Lee, walk on the DePaul basketball. That he was the 13th guy.
Did you play against Tommy Kleinschmidt?
No, he
then
quit school.
That's it. Nothing. Tommy Kleinschmidt.
No, but Larry Lee, he's like a 5'8".
Oh, is he the Asian guy that was on the team that just? Okay, I know who that is.
Never. The only time he got in a game that was because the whole crowd was chanting Larry. They didn't even know why they were chanting it. It was like Rudy.
He was DePaul's Rudy.
But he could play. Like he was good. I mean, he was quick. He could shoot. I mean, he had a great first step.
I didn't know Amon Shumpert was from Oak Park.
Yep.
He's from Oak Park.
Yes, he is.
So going back to the Bulls why isn't Joakim Noah out campaigning for players to come?
He is. What makes you think he isn't?
I mean, everything Joe does is
why isn't Derrick Rose
really
a better question?
Because Derek is not going to do it. He's gonna whisper to Reggie, and Reggie's gonna come out and go, the Bulls aren't putting a team with them, and then he's gonna sit back and limp around.
Plays with Kevin Love in the summertime.
Yeah, but Joe is loud and boisterous, and everything he does is very over the top. So why isn't he over the top publicly going, "They should all come to the Bulls"?
Well,
I've got big hair.
They can until July 1st.
But the players can do it.
I don't think the players.
Things,
I don't think the players can do it till July 1st. I thought it was just team officials.
I
think players.
I thought that's what the back channels were.
because of July 1st is the time when other teams can go out and actually start talking to players for free agency. Not that I say that in virtual quotes because they probably have already, but that's when they're supposed to start talking. And until then, the team that the player's on has the rights to try to work out a contract deal. So July 1st, Joakim Noah could publicly come out and say, "I want Melo."
And Comcast Sports today reported that Carmelo was going to give first crack to the Bulls to sign him.
Maybe, I mean, was visiting the Bulls, Houston, and Dallas. Go figure, two Texas teams. Dallas. I'm sorry, Houston scares me. I mean, they already got rid of a Sheik. They say they have a deal in place for Lynn. I mean, the biggest thing, I guess.
Who is taking Lynn?
I don't know. He sucks. I don't know. I guess the biggest thing for Houston that why Melo wouldn't want to go play with them is they already have Harden, and if Melo comes to the Bulls, he's the guy. If he goes to Houston, he's got to split being that guy with Harden, and then you have Dwight Howard who needs to be the guy too. So
he needs to be the guy, but he hates being the guy.
Yeah, dude, Dwight Howard could be the most amazing guy ever. That sounded weird. He's so good. It sucks. I wish he was a Bull. But anyway, even with his antics. But anyways, that's besides the point. He's the reason why Joakim Noah will never be the best center in the game. You know, he'll always be better than Joakim Noah. I mean, it makes sense for Melo to come to Chicago. It really does. Melo would be the guy. He would be loved by the fans. He'd from a media perspective, he'd be It'd be great. He would get his shoe line continuing, and making more money from the shoe line and all that stuff. It's if you're looking from a cash flow as well as how he fits with the team, it fits like a glove and not an OJ glove.
But the OJ glove didn't fit.
Well, I said not an OJ glove, so that's right. I had to bring that up in case you would have brought that up. I'd kind of beat you to the punch.
So I guess because we're both exhausted, we should wrap this up. What's your prediction for the next few days? Because is Tuesday is the first. So starting Tuesday, what's your prediction by the time we do this next week? What do you think is going to happen with the Bulls and free agency?
I predict a lot of talk and a lot of assumptions.
Do you think Melo signs early?
I don't want to predict anything. I don't know. Like, he might and he might not. It depends. If he says, forget about New York, I'm coming to Chicago, he might. If he, I don't care about money. If he's like, I'm coming to Chicago, New York, try to work out a sign and trade, I don't think it'll be done in a week.
Yeah, I mean, LeBron's going to be late, but I think Melo's going to sign early.
Yeah.
Not first day early, but I think
here's
he'll
the thing,
sign.
though. I think all those small forwards that are free agents are going to wait to see where Melo goes.
Well, I think that they're going to set the tone.
Yeah. So.
Because nobody's going to want to sign the mid-level guys if they have a chance to sign the big-name guys.
Or even the mid to big guy. Like, I would put Dang above a mid-level guy. And I would put Ariza above a mid-level guy. But yeah, no, I mean, once Melo goes, I think all the dominoes will fall after that. That cliche or the phrase that everyone says. But yeah.
Yeah,
who knows? I'm at the point where there's so much talking about it. It's like, let's just see what happens, and hopefully we get Melo. And if we don't, then we talked earlier about Plan B, and it's not that bad.
So, I guess we'll wrap that up there. And next week I want to really hit baseball hard. I mean,
not even talking about Jose Abreu.
He's clobbering the ball.
Babe Ruth.
And next week I want to talk about Jake Arrieta.
Yeah.
I think he could be a cog, could and should be a cog for the Cubs in their rebuilding plans.
Yeah, I agree. He's been looking great.
So, I want to talk about that. It's already going to be a long show because I had a segment before this with Chris Block from the Committed Indian and the thirdmanin.com. So this has been a long Bulls and Blackhawks talk because of the draft. And next week I really want to hit baseball hard. So especially 4th of July, it's we're really coming into the heart of the season. So I guess that's going to wrap up this week. Thanks, Gary, for being on the show.
Well, thank you, Sean.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for another episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. And I promise next week we're going to do a lot of Bears, a lot of Cubs, and a lot of Sox. We'll talk Blackhawks and Bulls as well, but the emphasis will really be on baseball and football. With that, thanks for listening, and check us out on the website, swerskisports.com, and also the Twitter page is twitter.com/swerskisports. And we also put the show on YouTube, which if you're listening on the podcast, on the iTunes or whatever, you don't really need to because it's just the audio version, but you can check that out as well. And thanks a lot to our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. Check them out at icehogs.com.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her, you can have her, she's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van, and she looks like...
Remember, New Yorkers, smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears! Oh, when the Bears go bearing down,